I do thank everybody for joining us today for this presentation of Sage Paperless Construction focused on the AP Flow in ePortal. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Marshall Baranek, who's going to be presenting the solution today from Sage. And Marshall, do you have audio? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, Tony. Are you receiving me on your end?
I do have clear audio and I can also see your screen perfectly, so I appreciate that. So I'm not going to do much in the way of introductions. I do appreciate everybody for joining us today. And again, as mentioned, if you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You are self-muted right now, so feel free to unmute yourself or post those in the chat as we go. If not, I can interject questions as they come about. But Marshall, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, sir.
Yeah, and thank you for that introduction there, Tony. And I want to welcome everyone once again for joining us here today. And we are going to be taking a look at the Sage Paperless Construction solution, focusing on the AP Flow as well as a couple of the remote tools from the ePortal. And we are going to start the demonstration today by going over a couple slides. However, I do want to spend the majority of the time within the software. As questions come up, please do submit those into the Q&A section or feel free to unmute yourself if you're on the live demonstration here today. And so the first thing I would like to cover is today's agenda. We are going to start by covering the question, what is Sage Paperless Construction? We're going to talk about how it can be used for document storage purposes. However, it's really meant to enable your workflow and help your staff, do the job easier. We're going to take a look at the AP Flow invoice lifecycle, and we're going to follow an invoice as it might go through your company today. And then we're going to take a look at how you might interact with this program from outside of your network or from anywhere that you might have an internet connection. Finally, I do also want to show the eCapture application today. I think I'm actually going to start with the eCapture application. There's some new functionality that I want to make sure that you guys are all aware of when it comes to paperless eCapture. And as always, we will reserve some time at the end for question and answer. And so please understand that this is just one of the different tools that we're going to be looking at when we talk about the Sage Construction and Real Estate product suite. Here you can see some other products that do connect to your 300 CRE as well as your 100 contractor solution. But today we will be focusing on the Sage Paperless Construction. If you guys are curious about some of those other topics that you might see here, feel free to submit questions about those as well and reach out. Also, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel for ETHOSystems, just type in ETHOSystems YouTube and it'll bring you right to it. And you can find topics on each of these different pieces of software here there as well. So I do like to start off with the question, what is Sage Paperless Construction? Excuse me, I had to cough there. I'd like to start off with the question, what is Sage Paperless? And well, first and foremost, this is an enterprise content management system, meaning that this system is designed to store your company's documents and deliver them to the appropriate people. You will see in today's demonstration how we can start to automate some of your repetitive tasks, as well as empower your staff to do their work properly. You will also see that we can use this system to hold people accountable. Are we taking advantage of discounts in a timely manner? If not, where are the bottlenecks in that process? Well, by running our processes through Sage Paperless, we can gain new visibility into our AP processes. And so what you see here on the middle of this slide is your Sage Paperless Construction system. Now, whether you guys are a 300 CRE customer or a 100 contractor customer, it will integrate with your ERP solution. When we talk about the licensing of Sage Paperless, customers will either get started with the AP Flow, which is going to be able to do everything that we're going to show today, or they'll go for the full-blown premium version of Sage Paperless, which has some more features that we aren't going to talk about today, including document routing capabilities. But in addition to that functionality, we do also have paperless cloud services. And this is the idea that we're going to be interacting with this solution from anywhere that we have an internet browser. We do have 3 applications available, including the eCapture, eForms, and ePortal applications, but more on that later. For today's demonstration, we are going to be focusing on AP Flow. And per the normal AP Flow process, it might actually start one step before you capture the invoice. If your company is issuing purchase orders out of Sage or perhaps subcontracts, you might actually issue that PO first. And then after some time, the invoice will then come in. Now, start to think about how you guys bring those invoices in today. Do they come in through the mail, or now that COVID has changed a lot of the way we work, probably most of those are coming in via email. And so do you have a designated email address set up for vendors to email you documents? Well, if you do, we can talk about some automated ways of capturing invoices, and I have an example of that today. Whether we're scanning the invoices in or dragging them from email, the next step is to enter in a little bit of information about the document. Now, we do have OCR technology, which will essentially make this step a lot easier and pull values from the pages as they're being scanned. Once we have enough information there, and we've entered in some cost code, job information, or tied it back to one of those purchase orders, we will then route that invoice for approval within the system. Whether you're within your local network or if you access it via an internet browser, we can access those invoices that have been routed for approval. There will be a final step of review, and that's going to be exporting them into your Sage accounting system. The thought here is that all of the coding and all of the approval has been taken care of, but your accounting system will still be used for cutting the check or perhaps generating those electronic payment files. And so that's just one piece of the Sage Paperless Construction system. One of the premium features, which is outside of the scope of the demonstration today, will allow you to electronically route your project-based documents as well as human resources forms or other documents. We can implement a purchase process. So perhaps we want to issue a purchase order, but it needs internal approval first. Well, we can essentially take the functionality we're going to be looking at with AP Flow and apply that to any other document type, and that will facilitate the document routing. And finally, we have the paperless cloud services. We're going to first take a look at the eCapture application. And I'm going to show you guys a live look into my cell phone. And I'm going to show you guys how we can capture documents using a cell phone camera. And we have some new functionality that's come to that we'll be showing in the demo today. The ePortal and the eForms can both be accessed from the web browser. When I show the ePortal today, you will see where the eForms is located. The eForms is a way that we can digitalize our company's forms and then have them easily accessible, making it really easy to distribute those as well as easy to collect the results. And then we can distribute those forms using the document routing as necessary. The ePortal is where we can access invoices that have been routed to us, as well as other documents that may be stored within Sage Paperless. And we'll be taking a look at all of this functionality here today shortly. And so with that introduction there, we'll go ahead and jump on into the software here today. And what you guys should be looking at now is the ETHOSystems YouTube page. I'll put a plug in once again. If you guys would like information on more Sage products, this is a great place to locate that. But what we're going to be focusing on today is the paperless construction solution. And what you're looking at now is my Sage construction system. Now, this is a great way that we can house documents, and this system can be used for document storage. The way that we're going to manage different documents will be by document type. What I did there is I opened up the search utility. And so you can imagine after using this product for some time, we may want to pull documents out, whether that's to support our billings or if a GC is requesting documents from us, we need to have them readily available. And so right here within the search utility, we could search for all document types very easily. I've got about 1,500 documents in here, and you can see the different document types that you might want to store. But we could come over to the left-hand side and check off, AP invoice and say purchase orders and search for those. What I want to point out is here in the bottom left-hand corner, it says index criteria. And these are the different index values or tags against these documents. We're just going to show those for the ones that you've checked off. And notice down here for AP invoice, I could sort this by vendor. I could search by a particular vendor, or I could come down here to job name or to job number. Now, this is just the first place where I'm going to show the integration back to your accounting system. We can look up a list of vendors using our F4 function key. Notice how I pulled up a list of jobs directly from Sage. So I can select the appropriate one and search. Notice how I returned that down to about 176 documents. I could then search between date periods or other parameters, and you can hover over an item here to get a nice preview of that without even having to click into it. You can also add annotations to your documents. Here's a couple examples on this one that I chose here. You can select one document or select a handful, or you could grab all of them and then email, print, save to file, and distribute these documents as necessary. Now you can access the documents here from the search utility, but you can also come into your Sage accounting system. So if you're using 300 construction and real estate, you can access the different items from the menu options on the left. Simply jump into an inquiry, select the paperclip icon, and you can return documents directly from 300 CRE. So to start the demonstration here today, I do want to start by highlighting the eCapture application. Now, there are many ways to get documents into the paperless system, and I'm going to highlight a couple of those options today. Now, for invoices, you're going to want to set up an email capture or do those manually. But perhaps you guys manage credit card receipts in your company today. If there are some callers on the line today that have a heavy amount of credit card users in your company, then you're probably aware that it can be difficult to get a hold of all of those, let alone matching them up to the statement when you reconcile each month. Well, what I want to show is a different way to approach that problem. And so what I'm showing you here is a live look into my cell phone that's sitting here on my desk. And so the eCapture application is very cost effective. It's only a few dollars a month for each user. And using the eCapture, we can not only capture credit card receipts, but we can capture other documents as well. With the eCapture Advanced license, you can capture any document type that you have within Paperless, such as invoices, receiving tickets, packing slips, or in today's example, we're going to capture a credit card receipt. Now, when I click Begin here, the next thing that you're going to see are the different fields that you might want to enter on a credit card receipt. Notice the job number here. This job number is going to tie back to your jobs that are within Sage. So I could put this in for, say, the Northwest Food Warehouse. The next thing you could do is, type in the credit card number that the credit card is being used for. If your user only has one company card, they'll only see the card appropriate. Otherwise, you'll select from that list. Now, here's where I want to highlight some of the new functionality that's come in. Under the transaction date and the transaction amount, I want to show how we can actually automatically fill that in using some receipt scanning technology. What I'm going to do here is take a picture of this receipt, and you can clearly see the receipt total is for $20.98. So I'll click OK. If we scroll down to the bottom here, there's a little ID receipt button. And if you tap that, it'll go ahead and scan the receipt and put in the receipt total as well as the date on that receipt into the fields up here above. Notice that I was in Pacific City out here in Oregon back in May, on May 9th, and it pulls in the transaction amount here for $20.98. And then we can enter some transaction notes here as well. We could use this field for, we could use this field to talk to text. And that'll highlight how we could alleviate some of that data entry a step further. Now, if I go ahead and submit this image here, it's then going to be readily available within Sage Paperless Construction. Apologies for the watermark there, but it says your credit card receipt has been submitted successfully. And so if you guys are managing credit card receipts in your company, typically the next thing you would do is match that up to the credit card statement. You may have noticed here that my 11 just ticked up to a 12. And that's letting you know that a new document has hit my paperless system. Here's the image of that credit card receipt that I took just a moment ago. And you can even look up at the index values, all those things that I entered in there, including that dictation that I did into the notes field, as well as the amount that it pulled in automatically. So that shows how easy it is to pull in a credit card receipt. Now, I do have other demonstrations which will highlight the credit card importer, and do know that the credit card importer is totally included with the AP Flow. And so if you're curious on how that works, we can show you on a one-on-one demo, and then we can route those statements for further approval if necessary. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to transition a little bit, and we're now going to talk about the invoice lifecycle. And we're going to talk about those 4 steps that I laid out in terms of capturing an invoice, doing some coding against the invoice, routing that for approval, and then submitting that into your Sage accounting system. Now, there's a few different ways that we can get invoices into the paperless system. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight a couple different ways that we can do that. You'll notice here that inside of my Outlook, I received an email here from Barth. It's a Barth invoice here. Now, there are lots of ways you can get this invoice into the system. I could simply grab it right from this document or right from this email and drag and drop it into the paperless system. Notice when I hover the document over the paperless system, my options here do change. I could open the file, or I could open the file and take another action, such as creating a batch of files to work with, indexing the file for later searching. We could route this file for further approval, but for most documents, they're going to end up in a queue, and we're going to push these documents to a queue. Now, when I go to push that to a queue, bear with me one second. I actually dropped the document, so let me grab it once again. We're going to push that to a queue, and when you do that, we'll be able to get that into the appropriate place. And let me do that once again. Oh, you know what? I'm on my wrong email. Let me do it this way. Okay. We're going to go ahead and open up that file here. Let me go ahead and highlight the other way that I was going to do it today, which is a little bit more significant if you ask me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to highlight a different way that we can capture these documents. When I drag over my email here, notice how underneath my inbox on the left-hand side, we have a paperless hot folder. Now you could do what I'm about to show you on your inbox. If you had a designated email set up like invoices@yourcompaniesname.com, then we could set this up on the inbox. Alternatively, if you had it set up on your personal email like I do today, I would recommend setting up a folder, such as a paperless hot folder. What I'm going to do here is take that email I had just a moment ago, and I'm going to drag it into the paperless hot folder. So you'll notice here I have one invoice, and I'll just show you what it looks like real quick. You'll see it's a very simple invoice, nothing too significant about it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to allow Sage Paperless to reach into my inbox and pull in those documents intermittently. Now you're going to set this up to run once a day, once an hour, or however often you best see fit. And so what Sage Paperless is doing right now is it's reaching into my Outlook inbox, and it's actually going to reach into this folder and pull this document out. Now, what happens with this document as soon as it gets pulled out is going to be up to you. You could have it simply delete it. Alternatively, you could have it move into an archive folder, which is what I have it do. You guys watched that in real time, how it pulled that document out of this folder, put it back into my archive folder right here, but it also pulled a copy into Sage Paperless Construction. And that's one of the ways that we can automatically pull documents into Sage Paperless. You could do the same thing with a file folder. So we could set documents up in a file folder and pull those in. And so that covers kind of the first step in that invoice lifecycle. What I wanted to show is that that is the first step in this invoice lifecycle, which is capturing those documents. And we kind of showed a couple different examples today. I showed how we could capture a credit card receipt, which is essentially an invoice or a bill that we have to pay later. And then we also showed how we could set up an automatic form of capture using our email address. Now we could also capture invoices from our cell phone just as easily. And so the next step in that process is to start to enter some details against those invoices. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to assume the role of your AP processors or whomever's responsibility it is to initially interact with an invoice. So as soon as that invoice comes in, who is it in your company that receives that and interacts with those invoices? Well, that person is going to come into the program here. They're going to launch Paperless Construction. And you'll notice that I'll interact with the program through these menu options here at the top. However, I have set up a workflow tab today for demo purposes. The first thing that you're going to want to do is come into the invoice entry. This is going to launch the AP Flow module here on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is where we can go ahead and get started. You'll notice that we have a couple different queues here that are set up. These are the different places that the documents will land before they get processed. So you'll notice here, if you look at this document here, if you look at the creation date here is today's date, and it was about 3 minutes ago. I have 11:20 a.m. I'm on the West Coast here, and it's 11:23. So this document was pulled in just a couple minutes ago, which you watched in real time. Notice how the attachment name was A1 electric invoice.pdf, and that's what it pulls the name into here. You'll also notice that there's a note that gets attached to the document that lets everyone know that this document came in from my Outlook account. Now we're going to use this same invoice for the duration of the demonstration here today. And I'm going to go ahead and click New Invoice here to get started. Now keep in mind, you could use the entry screens within the accounting systems today if you'd like. And then you could index the image against the record in Sage. However, I would recommend using the entry screens that are within Paperless Construction. There's lots of reasons for that, including the ability to look up against your vendors. We can search against these lists if necessary to find the appropriate one. But there's more. If we do enter invoice numbers, just like in Sage, it'll check that for any duplicate entries. But for today's example, I'm going to type that in as 10.28.2020 for today's date. Now, we do have other features here. You can check out vendor history at your fingertips, so you can see invoices that have been paid to this vendor in the past. You can do custom allocations. If you have ways that you pull line items in often, you can set those up for customization. I'm going to clear those real quick. You can also have the ability to add a vendor on the fly. So if it's your first time doing business with a vendor, we can add them directly from here. We'll go ahead and enter some details against the invoice, but I'm going to go over this portion of the demonstration fairly quickly today. But if you guys do have more questions, just know that we can code an invoice every single way you could do it within Sage today. Now, whether you're coding this as an expense invoice, a direct cost invoice, or perhaps you're going to tie this to a commitment within Sage, we can do each of those. When I say commitment, I mean purchase order or subcontracts. And so for today's example, I'm going to say that this particular invoice is going to be tied to this purchase order here. Now, you don't have to fulfill your purchase orders. Just like in Sage, if you're not receiving the entire purchase order, you can indicate how much of that commitment you are receiving. One nice thing about Paperless is it provides details on the job cost to date, as well as the amount that's currently unposted sitting in Paperless. So even though invoices haven't hit Sage Accounting yet, we do still have visibility to them. We're going to add this to the invoice here today, and notice how the details down below fill in for me. The PO details fill in based on what you selected a moment ago, and the job, cost code, and category are all determined based on that purchase order. Details such as tax groups will also be determined based on the PO, but if we need to enter in any additional taxes, retainage, or other details there, we're empowered to do so. Once we've entered the details here, we can then go ahead and route this for approval. However, some companies will require a three-way match or backup to the AP invoice. A three-way match might be if you have an invoice, a copy of the purchase order, and a copy of the packing slip, and you have all three of those, then we can go ahead and pay this invoice. Well, if we open up the document match feature here, what you'll notice is that Paperless will automatically attach a copy of this purchase order to the AP invoice. Now, keep in mind, I've got a demo set, so I actually have a couple copies of this in here, but if you just had one, it would just attach it appropriately. But we're going further here in this window. If you go down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see other documents related to this vendor and related to this invoice. So perhaps we need to pull in a delivery ticket and attach that to the AP invoice. Well, we can go ahead and do that. Perhaps there's another document, such as a certification of liability insurance. We can tie that to the invoice as well. Once we've attached all the required documents, we can go ahead and route this for approval. If the invoice does not require approval, or if you don't want to set up an invoice approval process, you could simply click approve and then send it to Sage. But there's a couple reasons why I would recommend setting up the route invoices. The first thing to keep in mind is that if you have any compliance warnings set up in AP, you would get notified in Sage, and so we're going to carry those over automatically, and you'll get notified in Paperless as well. But there's two main reasons why you want to set up routing rules. And the first reason is more important than the second, in my opinion. If anyone changes the coding on an invoice, we're going to re-trigger those routing rules. So what that means is that if you tried to approve an invoice on someone else's job, it's going to re-trigger the routing rules and make sure that that person is notified as well. The second reason I would recommend setting up the routing rules is so that you don't have to memorize who it goes to. Now you can set this up to go to one person or multiple. And for this example, I actually have this going to 4 people, Danielle, Ka'ahu, Keith, as well as myself. I'm going to click Route Invoice here, and it's going to go ahead and send that off for approval. Paperless recognizes that I'm the same person right here, but I'm going to select no. I do not need to approve that invoice right now because I want to show you guys what it looks like in the next step. Now that was me coding an invoice manually. However, we do have the ability to scan the invoices through an OCR reader. And if you do that, you can have it come into the same queue or a different queue. And if you check out this invoice here, this invoice already has some coding done for me. Notice how I have the header details, the dates, and the total all entered. And we could also match this to a purchase order if that's what you guys wanted to do to pull in some details down below. But if you have more interest in the OCR capabilities, I'd be happy to discuss that on a one-on-one demonstration. But what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about the approval process. And so if you guys are tracking with me so far, we have now entered some details against the invoice, and then we have routed the invoice for approval. Now, there's actually two main ways that you can approve invoices with Sage Paperless. You can do so right within the Sage Paperless application here, come within the Approve Invoices window that I've opened now, and this is going to show you all of those invoices that have been routed to you for approval. Notice here at the very top, I have the document that's titled 10.28.2020. Now, there are lots of features here that we can do. We could edit the invoice if we needed to, but perhaps there's a project manager or an invoice reviewer and you do not want them to change the coding on the invoice. Well, we can simply restrict that privilege. We can remove that edit invoice button and lock down the coding here. That way, only the people that you deem necessary can edit those invoices. Now notice here how I have some color coordination. Some of these invoices are blue, some are red, some are black. We want to draw attention to those invoices that are time sensitive. Anything in blue here is eligible for a discount. So if we pay that right away, I might be able to save some money. If I pay the one I brought in today before the 2nd, which is here in about 4 days, I'll be able to save some money there too. Now, what I wanted to highlight here is that when I click Approve Invoice here, I'm approving it on premise or within the native application. What I'm going to show you guys next is going to be the web portal environment. And I want to show how whatever is in this system will be reflective in that system as well, as we're leveraging the APIs for this program. So in order to do that, I'm going to approve an invoice here. And it says here that we get those compliance warnings once again, but I'm going to waive that for today's example. And what it's going to do with that invoice is move it from pending to approved for my user. I did not highlight the document match, but I can do that here in just a moment via the ePortal. And so the first thing I'll highlight before I show you guys the ePortal is that we will actually give you guys an email mailer that you guys are going to mail out to your different invoice reviewers. And it's going to look something like this. It's going to show that how many invoices that reviewer has in their box for review. And then it's going to have a link right here to the paperless ePortal. So you guys can send this out to the appropriate reviewers. They can click that button and it brings them right to this page. But keep in mind, since this is just on an internet browser, you could imagine that one of your project managers is on his couch on a Saturday, can pull up his cell phone, and he can start approving invoices right away. Now, it remembers my credentials here, so I'm going to sign on in. And as soon as this page loads, I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side of the screen here today. You should notice 5 different menu options: invoices, documents, document routing, eCapture, and eForms. We're going to start on the invoices portion today. When you open up invoices, you can see the different invoices, the different statuses, whether by job number or otherwise. Scrolling down to the bottom of this list here, you're going to see the 10/28/2020 that I brought into the system earlier today. But what I want to highlight is there's a big green A next to it. And that big green A indicates that it has been approved. In fact, I approved it, just a couple minutes ago, and you guys watched that. So that connection should be immediate, is what I'm highlighting today. If we jump into the details here, we can show what has been entered on the invoice thus far. Now, keep in mind, if you guys have a slightly different workflow, this person in the portal might be responsible for doing some of the data entry on the invoice. And in that regard, you could come in here and start to edit the line detail. And so you can do invoice editing from this tool. You could even come here and look up the POs that are within your Sage system, and you can see all the different details that might be on those POs. If you needed to tie that to a different job, You could switch the line item type and then code it to a different job as well. But that's all security permitting. Otherwise, we would lock down these different options here, um, depending on how you want it for that user. Now, notice if we have all the header details, and if everything looks good to go, we could come to the upper right-hand corner and approve the invoice. Otherwise, we do have the ability to reject the invoice. Now, rejecting the invoice is going to send it back to the initial processor, allow them to make the changes, and then allow them to send it for review once again. But before approving the invoice, we might want to look at the notes section. We can see that this document was imported from my Outlook account today. We can see that the reviewer waived those compliance warnings and that I also waived the compliance warnings when I approved the invoice. It also has the fact that I did approve it right here. The next thing I want to highlight are the documents down below. Here's a copy of the AP invoice. Here's a copy of the purchase order that carried along with that. Here's a copy of my receiving ticket, as well as my certification of insurance. And so if everybody's doing their job correctly, I have lots of supporting documentation at my fingertips when approving these invoices. Once we approve it, it'll jump right into the next invoice, or we can come up here and select the next one in the upper right-hand corner. That covers the invoices section for the Sage Paperless ePortal. There's a couple other things I want to highlight. That's that if you guys have multiple data folders or multiple companies, we can toggle between those right here. I'm actually connected to a couple different data sets. Another thing I want to highlight is the idea of proxy access. I'm currently looking at all of those invoices for my user. However, if you had someone else in your company, then say that they went on a sabbatical or they took a long vacation, you could actually access their invoices right from here. So I could come in here and see what invoices have been routed to Kaahu. And I do believe the invoice I routed today needs to be approved by both myself and Kaahu. And so now I'm taking a look at his invoices. Here's the 10/28/2020 down below, but it's pending as he has yet to approve the invoice. And so that just shows another feature that's available when using the ePortal, the idea of proxy access. I want to take a moment to highlight the other features here on the ePortal. The next section down is documents. Documents is a great tool because we can access all of those documents that are within our paperless construction system, whether those be AP invoices or perhaps they might be project documents such as drawings, or perhaps you have job photos in there. It has a really smart search feature, and so as you start to type in, it'll go ahead and snap to the appropriate thing. So I could type in, 02 if I was looking for a particular date, and if I got a little more creative with how I described these, I could search further. But we're also searching the index values, and so you can really use that search to snap to what you want. And here's a particular photo. I had a customer get really creative with the document section, and what they did is they actually turned this into an HR portal. And let me explain. You'll see here that we have 401k enrollment forms, 401k loan documents. We have payroll documents here as well. Well, she set it up to where when they went into the program and they accessed those HR documents, they only saw their documents. So if I went here under payroll checks, it would just be my payroll checks or just whoever accesses ePortal. So you could set it up that way using document security as well. The next section down is document routing. Now, keep in mind that document routing is a premium feature that is not included with AP Flow. However, using the document routing, we can route other documents around the system. So whether we're talking about like a PTO request or a reimbursement request, or perhaps you have an expense form that needs to be routed for approval, we can leverage the system's document routing capabilities to accomplish that. What I want to highlight right here is that I used the document routing earlier in the demo to send this credit card receipt to myself. And I took this receipt since we've been on the call here today. We can route that to one person or multiple so that you're notified whenever those documents hit the system or a particular thing happens. We can see those that are hit our inbox as well as those that we've sent out as well. Now, we did cover the eCapture, and I mentioned there's also an eCapture Advanced. With eCapture Advanced, you can access eCapture through the web portal here as well. This is great for capturing digital documents, such as a hotel receipt that they emailed to you or something like that. We can click here or drag and drop documents to submit them to the ePortal. Now, there is one other feature, which is the eForms, and we're not going to highlight that today. However, if you are curious about eForms, we can show that to you in a one-on-one demo. I've seen this used for expense reimbursement, field POs, and similar documents to that. All right, so that covers those features for a moment. But if you guys are still tracking with me, then you know there's still one more step in that invoice lifecycle here today. And we'll try to get through it quickly here. Once those invoices have been routed for approval, they will need to be fully approved before they can be exported into your accounting system. And so I'm going to show a couple ways that we can do that today. Now, this part of the process is typically facilitated by an accounting supervisor or a controller, but it can just as easily be done by an AP processor. It's just all about how you guys want to set it up. But I'm going to show you guys the Invoice Manager. And the reason I like the Invoice Manager is because we can see all documents within Sage Paperless from here. I'm going to come down here into the Pending tab here in the upper right-hand corner. And here you're going to see all those documents that are currently awaiting approval. You can sort by the different fields here at the top, and I sorted by entry date, and I found my invoice here at the very top. We can select reviewers to see the different reviewers for this invoice. And notice how I'm the only one that's approved it this far. Now, I get the question fairly regularly, do we have the ability to override the approval on an invoice? And the answer to that is yes, security permitting. I could come up here and click approve, and it's going to approve that for all users. Notice I get that compliance warning once again, but just know that it will put it in the notes log that I did approve that. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is come up to the upper right-hand corner and come into the approved tab. Here you'll be met with all of those documents that have been fully approved, including the one that I brought in today. Now, keep in mind that I did override the approval, and it will put it in the notes log that I did that, but it's also going to do one other thing that we haven't talked about yet here today, and it's going to record every single action to the audit log. What I just did is I generated a report that shows every single time this document was opened, closed, or otherwise acted upon. So at 11:23 today, we opened this document up. We created an invoice. I was listed as the processor, and we can see all the other details here as well. There's 2 pages of details just on the actions we took today. And just know that you wouldn't necessarily come here just to see if it's been approved or not, but it can be that 20/20 hindsight for all of your documents there. The next step in the workflow is to come to the Approved tab. You can select one invoice or multiple and click Export to send to the accounting system. Next, it'll prompt you for the accounting date. This is optional. And what I mean by optional is that you can enter it right here as a batch of invoices when they go into Sage. You could enter it on the actual invoice, or you could simply have it default to the invoice date. But I'm going to click OK there today, and you will see about how long it takes to export one invoice into accounting. And then we'll be met with a nice report based on that export. Here's all the details that were sent over to Sage, and we could now go into Sage and go ahead and post that invoice and get the payments cut. Now, there are many other features to Sage Paperless that we just do not have time to cover here today, but I really wanted to focus on the AP Flow as well as some of those web features. But we also have a check review module. so review your checks before they go out as well. We can do AP accruals, pushing documents into an accrual account. And we have lots of reports that come right out of the box, such as discount status reports, invoice approval statistics, good stuff like that. But that's just about everything that I had to show you guys here within the software, but I did have just a couple closing slides before we dismiss. I hope you can tell by the demonstration why your company should go paperless if you haven't already, and how a document storage system like Sage Paperless can help empower your workflow. We showed how this product can be used to help empower accountability across your company with strong audit tracking capabilities. We're going to be reducing double data entry by leveraging OCR technology, as well as interfacing directly with Sage, as not to having to double enter all of the details on those invoices like shown today. This product is designed to save your company time by eliminating paper chase, as it's so much easier to recall documents when they're stored digitally. We're going to improve your productivity by empowering your workflow and providing easier access to your project-related documents. We're going to reduce your paperwork and overhead administrative costs by switching to electronic-based system, which will also eliminate the need for paper files and their storage requirements. If you have not already, please do submit questions into the Q&A section, as we will be getting to those here shortly. I wanted to thank everyone for your time here today. I know we went just a couple minutes over, but if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Tony using the information on the screen. You can reach me at marshall.baranek@sage.com or Tony at tony.mary@ethossystems.com or at 480-335-8080.